Welcome to this course in organizational culture and its impacts on human capital. My name is Dr. Chris Roberts. I'm a professor at DePaul University in Chicago, USA. In this first part, we're going to be looking at the definitions and the explanations of what culture is about. As I go through the material, periodically I'll be referring to different companies as examples. Please understand that I'm not criticizing the companies, but bringing them forward to describe the kinds of approaches that can be used. Now, the definition of organizational culture, its most basic meaning, it's a shared values. It's the shared meaning held by members that distinguish it from other organizations. I'm sure you've experienced this yourself. Think of the companies you've worked for and the different climate, if you will, or how people interact with each other, or even classrooms you've gone into during your studies. It might be the same classroom you've been in before, but when you go in with a different group of students, a different professor, the mood is a little different, the feelings are a little different. And that's the kind of thing we're talking about here. It's that system of shared meaning that those participants in the group together feel and share with one another. Researchers certainly have studied this phenomena for a number of years. Shine's developed a model of culture to help us understand it, and he developed the model into three categories. He spoke about artifacts, which are the visual symbols, things to see to really distinguish the culture. They don't always tell us deeply what it means, but they're the kinds of things we can look at to see what's going on. It might be the behavior of employees from day to day, how they act and talk with one another, how they dress, maybe how the office is laid out or the workspaces are designed. And again, the visual symbols, whether it's artwork on the wall or company signage, but just different kinds of signals to employees about their workspace, what they feel and how they view themselves. Certainly what the organization says about itself, its espoused values, those values that they talk about. And again, it's not always going to capture everything about the culture, but it gives us a clue on what they think is important to themselves. And we look not only at the words that they use and the meaning of those, but we look at the patterns of how they express them, when they express them, what channels they use to express them, as part of that overall message of what those values are within the organization. And certainly underlying that are the assumptions, which often are unspoken, that people carry with themselves as they go forward. Sometimes it's views of the world and how things are supposed to function. Sometimes it's their sense of self-worth and their assumptions about themselves, their emotions, how they express them and what's involved in that in the workspace, and even more deeper assumptions beyond that many people don't even know that they're making, yet are an important part of what's going on. Shine's model really gives us a sense of the different things to think about as we begin our exploration of culture. So what we're talking about here as we look at the characteristics of organizational culture, realize these are dimensions we've figured out by studying existing businesses. And yes, they are tools that managers can take a look at and use to try and shape and guide the culture, but it's not something that's often planned in advance. So if we think about these different dimensions, and I bring up some companies, realize that all of this cultural aspect forms over time with everybody's input. So when we look at an organization and we look for these characteristics, we might think about, gee, what's the level of innovation and risk-taking that they've embraced? Now, if you think of a company like the international brand McDonald's, where they've really focused on minimizing the human resource component of that and focusing more on the standardization of operations of the machine that produces a lot of product at a quick rate. You know, they don't want employees to be innovative and taking risks in the local shops. They might do that back at corporate headquarters as they plan and think ahead. So they've built a culture where innovation and risk-taking is encouraged in the corporate headquarters, but not encouraged in all the restaurants, the outlets. That's intentional. The level of detail, again, just sticking with the McDonald's example, there's an incredible amount of detail because they care about the quality standard, that every hamburger or every French fry or milkshake that's produced is meeting those standards, those specifications. So there's a lot of thought to not only the process, but how employees are trained and live up to delivery of that process. That results in a culture that pays a lot of attention to details. Tied to that, outcome orientation. Does the culture really care about the outcome product more than they care about how they got there? Or is it more process-oriented than outcome-oriented. That's another important characteristic of understanding an organization's culture. And tied to that is that focus on people. How important are people in the process? Sure, people are involved in all of these organizations. I'm not saying they don't play a role, but culturally, how dependent are they? How important are they in the process? For professors in a university, very people-oriented, isn't it? The students are the key of the organization and the professors to deliver the knowledge. But if you think again like an organization such as McDonald's, where the turnover rate is expected to be pretty high, that low-level employees come in, work a short period of time and leave, the orientation is not so much on people and it's more on the systems and processes. So again, there are organizational choices to help build that culture. Now, a team orientation might play an important role in some organizations. Again, in a university environment, you can see typically where it's professor and students, it's not a strong team environment. Or a company like McDonald's, it's not a strong team. But in a large hotel environment, such as a Ritz-Carlton or a Hyatt or a Marriott brand, you might see large teams working together to make sure they deliver the product and have guest satisfaction. How aggressive are employees to be? How aggressive is the system? Again, is another reflection of the culture. A company like Ritz-Carlton and Four Seasons, focused on a 5-star product, they're not going to want employees to be overly aggressive with guests. They want them to be servitude. They want them to make sure that they're there and serving customers, but it's not an aggressive culture where they're out in a hard sales environment, perhaps. And a company like Ritz is looking for stability. They want the customers to count on what they're delivering time after time. So they build a culture with an effort to maintain long-term employees, to maintain systems and processes that are well understood by guests and employees so they can count on it. Now, a nimble company, say like Apple, or a lot of the telecommunications firms out today are rapidly changing. So stability plays a whole different role in those kinds of cultures. So I think with these different examples, you can see the kinds of things we look at to understand the culture of an organization. And they're really also tools that management might be able to influence as they shape what that organization is about. And we can take a look at those cultures and realize that some organizations choose to have strong cultures and really build it up, and other organizations have a weak culture. So we can look at many different firms, and I think if you think about a long-term firm, a firm focused on long-term employees like a Ritz-Carlton or Four Seasons, they do build up a strong value, and it's represented through the core values that are strongly held by employees and that guests understand and soon adopt and expect from the firm too. But a weak culture, like say a firm such as a McDonald's that has high turnover rate, that doesn't expect employees to be involved that long, knowing how they've designed the workflow. You know, it's an intentionality, but it does result in a weak culture. The employees don't get a strong commitment to and a belief in the core values because they're simply not intending to be there a very long time. So certainly the weakness or strength of the culture is another dimension we pay attention to. And finally, we look at the culture versus the management tool of formalization. Sure, an organization with high formalization has lots of rules, lots of systems, processes, and McDonald's fits in that description. They count on having these set of rules, these high levels of rules and processes to make sure as employees come and go, they can continue to meet the customer expectation of the quality of what they're delivering. But not all organizations can rely on or need to use high formalization, a high set of rules, predictability, et cetera, to build their culture. They can use this concept of organizational culture we're talking about to create the sense of how we work here, how we interact with one another, how we treat customers, as a different pathway to get to that same level of high delivery, high quality, high satisfaction of customers in delivering what we do. So culture is just another tool that management has. As we come to the end of this first module where we're learning about the definition and explanation of culture, I'd like you to understand that this is about understanding the employee's perceptions of the characteristics of culture, not whether they like the culture or not. We're really looking to see how much the culture encourages such dimensions or behaviors like teamwork, or does it reward innovation, or does it stifle initiative? This is different than job satisfaction. Job satisfaction is evaluative. It does look at whether the employees like what they're doing or not. The study of organizational culture is descriptive. Because management has such limited ability to change the culture, because it's a collective effort by employees over time as well as management over time, it's something that might be influenced or shaped, but it's not about controlling it. Therefore, our study of organizational culture is really about describing it.